Hello. On behalf of Rackspace Technology, I want to welcome you all to our first season of Coffee Talks for the Americas region. This has been a very successful program in our Latin America region. For first-time companies, this is a space where Rackspace Technology experts can share their perspective, trends, and solutions on top of any technology challenges, trends in 2023. I am pleased to introduce our Manager of Sales for the Mid-Market segment, Peter Lewis, and our Solutions Architect, Jake Walters. Before we get started, I'll let Peter and Jake tell us a little bit about themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. Peter Lewis, really happy to be here with a true expert, with Jake Walters. I've been with Rackspace a little over 9.5 years. I've had a unique path. I've worked within our customer success organization. From there, I moved into our product org, launching many of our multi-cloud products and offerings. And then I've been in our go-to-market portion of the business, both as a direct rep for a couple of years and then leading a sales team within this organization. And over the course of that entire 9.5 years, I have the privilege of working with Jake on and off in each of these roles. We've done a lot of really great and exciting projects together. And most importantly, we've helped clients use technology solutions to drive better business outcomes. And so glad to be here today. Looking forward to sharing our stories and perspective. Jake?
Hi, my name is Jake Walters. I'm a 15-year Racker. I started in our support organization back in 2008, right after Rackspace went public for the first time. I was in support for about 4 years. Due to my technical nature, I transitioned into technical sales in 2012. I have worked in many segments as a solution architect, solution engineer. I've done SMB install base. I've done our acquisition segment, worked in channel. I've actually done mid-market and enterprise install base. So I've seen a lot of different customers, like Peter mentioned, and we've helped them, really listen to what their needs are and then help drive those requirements. So, happy to be here today and telling you all about our solution.
Wow, over 20 years of Rackspace experience. That is amazing. Thank you for your introductions. Without further ado, let's hear about what they have to say about data center modernization in 2023.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. As you guys see on the slides, right, we're going to talk a bit about the challenges of data center modernization. And while we're talking it in the frame of 2023, Jake, you're 15 years, obviously serving a lot of different segments. Regardless of the role, right? This has been a challenge that customers have been trying to tackle for a long time. And I think the outcomes, the platforms, the solutions look a little different, right? But the same challenges customers are faced today with, right, when they go through it.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to point out, right, that when you think of any challenges, specifically like these, they're also opportunities. And so, in today's age, I feel there's really only a small amount of companies that feel like running, investing, modernizing their own on-premise data center is a competitive advantage, right?
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, like the example I think of, Jake, I think I've shared with you when I was asking for feedback with moving to like the hill country here in Texas. From being from the city, the idea of, hey, there's no water supply. You've got to drill your own well. You've got to maintain that well. If it freezes, like some of the winter freezes we've had, you're responsible for fixing it. And if there's a drought, you may have to dig even further, right? And so I think like if I relate that to building, managing, maintaining my own data center, that's a huge hurdle that I don't want to be responsible for. And I think many organizations don't want to be responsible for as well, right? They want to tap into the expertise. They look at, retrofitting their existing DC. You're dealing with physical constraints. You're trying to solve for what the new modern world looks like for data management, right? Modern security, and even architectural complexity, because if you listen to any of the experts, it's a multi-cloud world and it's only going even further. And so how do you architect for that complexity and then future-proofing your applications?
Yeah, there's tons of decisions that go into that, business case of I want to get out of the data center. So you're talking about drilling a well, right? So drilling the well is actually easy. You have to find the people that know the business, know the area, know the industry, and actually, then you have to research them and contract them, right? So it's similar to customers that are moving out of the data center, it seems like an easy task, right? You think I just want to get out of my data center, get into another colo data center, or go to a managed provider and have them manage it all. But then you find for every one thing that you're trying to solve, there's 10 or 15 things that come up, right? So there's a lot of different challenges that you have to solve for. And that's really, I think, where Rackspace can, be a true partner is we've done this for many, many years. We have a lot of different solutions, but at the end of the day, it really just comes down to listening to the customer, understanding their requirements, and then helping them solve that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the trend that we hear and where people want to go, right, is when they've realized that DIY is not necessarily the approach they want to continue on. They're looking at alternatives, right? And that may be the cloud providers, or maybe a partner like Rackspace that has operated world-class data centers for over 25 years, right? They tap into our economies of scale as it comes to security, resiliency, compliance, the processes that we've put in place over those 25 years, and even, I would say at scale, our resources and technical expertise, right? And really using those as their competitive advantage when it comes to modernization versus the DIY approach.
Yeah, we take all the heavy lifting off their shoulders for them.
Yeah. Jake, you talked a little bit about, I think when you and I go into, when we worked previously hand in hand with clients, we would go into our prep session, and our approach was always, and I think this is the Rackspace approach, was, okay, let's start with the why, right? What is the customer wanting to accomplish, rather than, our trend is to focus on the what, which is, okay, what technology do you want? Where do you want to go? What platform? What would you get there, right? But we always back it up in terms of, let's talk about the why. And what are those outcomes that you're seeking, right? And trying to accomplish with this modernization effort. And so I think
Go ahead.
The first challenge is really determining what is your why. Is it business or financial agility? Are you looking to drive operational efficiencies? For many, they're even thinking about, how do I reduce risks? And so then, our approach when we go to discovery is, let's go into the organization, let's dig in to the characteristics of the organization, the characteristics of the workload, and determine, based on both, how do we achieve the outcomes that they're seeking, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of the customers that we're talking to these days, they're actually coming back to private cloud environments from they've done the hyperscalers. They were told, somebody high up said, hey, we're going to cloud. Everybody's going to cloud, no matter what. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's faster. And so, you see these people, they do it, they make the decision. And then, all these decisions have to kind of like come into play there. It's like, how do I get there? Well, most people can't just revamp, re-architect, and redesign their application, their platform. So, and then there's probably a deadline, right? They're in a colo data center that is about to, it's like, hey, we have 8 months and we're turning off the light, so you got to get out of here. And so you see a lot of customers that do things like lift and shift. They'll say, well, we're just going to take our machine over here and move it over there, or like for like, it's going to be the easiest. But what we're finding is, if you do that, you end up paying more. It's more complex and paying more than you would in a private cloud, because you're trying to put that square peg into a round hole, and you didn't really refactor your application. It ends up, you're paying for things that you necessarily didn't realize. There's a lot of hidden costs. And so, we're seeing a lot of customers make that decision of, let's go back to the private cloud, because one, it's easier to maintain, and it's better to control costs, right?
Yeah. Jay, Jake, I got an analogy from a good friend of ours, right? And he used the analogy of like that same decision process, right? Relating it to like a diet. When most people choose their diet, they're trying to get some short-term gains. They're looking at maybe the latest fad, and they're not really focused on the long-term results. And so, they find that if it doesn't fit their lifestyle, right? Maybe it's too constricting, maybe the budget for the meal that this design is too expensive. maybe their lifestyle and being able to maintain it with how they go out on the weekends or after hours, or like you and I at the baseball fields every evening. It's pretty tough to eat a consistent meal plan. But as a result, right, they're not adhering to the diet. And so it's not the diet that failed, right? But it's the person who chose that because it didn't fit into them. I think the examples like you just highlighted, if you just pick that latest fad, if you pick the solution that's going to be one size fits all, we're going to move it in there for all of our workloads, you're unlikely to see those gains that you're seeking. And
Yeah,
it's not
they
just
don't understand how that doesn't, or how does that apply to me, right? Like this diet might be great for you, but how does that apply for me, and how am I going to continue to operate that way, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think like the industry data backs it up too, right? So like when a survey that I quote pretty often, Bain went out and surveyed almost 400 IT decision makers, and it was after their modernization effort. They choosing the public cloud as the platform, and what they found was cost had not gone down and complexity increased. Well, it goes back to that same analogy, right, of the diet, right? If you choose based on things that aren't meaningful for you, right? If you're choosing the platform, but you're not going to, refactor it, you're not going to take advantage of microservices, you don't have these wild swings in usage, then it's unlikely that you're going to find the gains and that long-term benefit that you're seeking.
Yeah, I mean, if you can develop your application to be cloudy, right, to decouple it, to take advantage of microservices and things like that, then sure. I mean, you can go to public cloud, but it's a lot harder than people think, because these monolithic applications that they have today, they just don't run. They run over there. They don't run over there effectively and cheaply, right? So that's where you really have to understand, like, maybe we should have looked at this. We see the repatriation all the time. I mean, big customers are saying, all right, let's make a shift, we're going to go back into private cloud. And that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's not even big. It's not even just the big customers. I think if you follow the trend that's out there online, right? Like there's the ones you wouldn't think in terms of like mid-market SaaS company, right? I think perfect fit for public cloud. But Basecamp, their CIO has a blog going. He's very, very vocal about why they're leaving the big public cloud providers and why they're repatriating into private cloud, because where the cloud excels, right, on those big swings in usage, on those microservices when you're extremely small and don't have the scale to reach the economics that matter, those benefits aren't relevant to them. It's like, Jake, people wouldn't know by looking at you, right, just how bougie you are. But like, I imagine you're one of those guys that probably use those public storage units, right, with like the temperature controlled wine cellars. I'm sure that's a perfect fit, right, for your wine collection and to have like that out there. But if you throw the other 85% of your old golf clubs, your furniture that you're clinging onto, and maybe some kids' mementos, you're not going to take advantage of the temperature control in the same way. It's not meaningful for those things, right?
So you don't want to store grandma's old couch in a temperature controlled storage unit?
It might be good for the plastic liner. I don't know if you had that growing up, but my grandma certainly had the plastic cover to protect it. It's probably still in pristine conditions. Maybe in our extreme heat, that might be one you want to have temperature control.
Yeah, you act like I live in the big city with all this climate controlled storage here.
Well, they're popping up all over here for sure. But I think in terms of this topic too, like one of the other thoughts is, Jake, you're having conversations at all levels, right? From the mid-market to the enterprise customers. And you tell me if you're hearing the same thing, right? But I think the main message I've heard in these economic times is customers want to maintain their cash reserves, right? They want to de-risk their organization as much as possible. Like their PMO group has looked at the project scopes. They're determining which ones are too risky, which ones are going to postpone until we get through these uncertain times. Are you kind of seeing the same thing across your base?
Yeah, it's a lot of customers looking to control cost. And so going into some of these solutions, it gives you a lot more flexibility, but it also gives you kind of where you have a baseline of cost that you're not going to spike too much, spike too high, too low, right? But also gives you that level of control that you're kind of used to. And then kind of how do you interact with your environment the way that you have in your data center?
Yeah. And I think that's why, we'll touch on it here in a bit. I think that's why there's been a lot of interest in our private cloud, VMware-based software-defined data center that we labeled as SDDC, which is the industry term as well. Is that really high performance compute, high performance environment that has a consistent VMware technology, right? One that they don't have to refactor their application to get into. It maintains the same look, the same field. And you said the kind of key word that every customer is asking for is they want control, right? They want access into it. They want to be able to leverage their resources, especially at the enterprise level if they have it. And the other customers want options to be able to tap into our resources at scale, much like I mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about this STDC offering that Rackspace has, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not redefining anything. We're not building anything. All we're doing is taking something like VMware and Dell platforms that have been tried and true, built and integrated together for years, and we're putting them into Rackspace offerings so that customers consume them. I actually was just talking to a customer the other day, and they're like, "Oh, well, I thought software defined data center SDDC was where we just kind of go in there. We don't pay for this, we don't do that." I'm like, well, it is and it's not. I mean, people have to understand what these offerings are, but like I said, at the end of the day, it's all a VMware backed solution on either single tenant or private cloud multi-tenant hardware that we help maintain and then they consume, right?
Yeah, and that tried and true consistency is important because the other piece, there's been even an uptick in co-location, right? And co-location, because I've heard clients tell us, we want to move this, right? We want to take advantage of this modernization, and the first step is going to be exiting our facilities and gaining some of those benefits. But they're not ready to take on big projects and move. And I think that's where the aspect that you mentioned is tried and true, being able to minimize risk by having a very simplified migration that leverages, industry leading software and tooling that's been proven, and things like HCX even, right? Where you can extend it as an extension of your data center for those more non-disruptive moves is a fantastic way to modernize your facility, get towards the path of modernization, tap into the economies of scale, the buying power from Rackspace, the resources at scale, those processes that we've talked about, all in a very risky, lightweight project that the team isn't going to take 3 years to execute and have a 10-year plan towards ROI, right?
Yeah, well, and what I also like about Rackspace is that we're not just one size fits all. We don't have a solution where, SDDC is all we offer, right? There's a lot of different things that Rackspace has done for many, many years, whether it's, you mentioned co-location. So there are some customers that are really trying to get out of their data center, but they've got this old, boxy mainframe that they just can't do anything with. Yeah. Know some COBOL programmers, but so they're like, what am I going to do with this? I still got to get this out of my data center. So, if you were to go to like a hyperscaler, well, you can't do that because you can't just slap an AS400 into, one of the hyperscalers, but, you can with Rackspace. So, you can get something like a cabinet or half cabinet from us. We can use our Rack Connect Global or service, which is connecting, compute within Rackspace into other Rackspace facilities. You can connect into telco or colo like Equinix, or you can go into the hyperscaler. So you can move into, say a VMware based solution. You can bring over some of your old legacy hardware while you figure out how to get off of that, or, modernize, go to maybe a lot of them are going to SaaS applications today. But, and then let's say you still want to take advantage of maybe some of the hyperscalers, we still have that partnership as well. And you can connect from all these environments at a private backbone that we have in between them, and low cost, no egress, or very low cost data transfer out fees.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the beginning, which is what are those whys? What are we trying to solve for? And then we will work through the how, which is that next part in terms of taking our agnostic approach, taking our expertise across many different technologies to figure out what is the right mix of what based on the workload, right? And I think why we're focusing a lot on SDDC here today is, when from a Rackspace perspective, when private cloud has the benefits of public cloud, like self-service, like scalability, like rapid provisioning, clients can achieve a much faster ROI. They no longer have to make large capital investments. They move to OpEx, they realize the tax benefits, and they have options. And I think that that's when you're at the best of both worlds. That's when customers win, is when they have options and different paths that they can choose.
Yeah, you're on the sales side, so you're probably not going to like me for this, but anytime I get in engagement with a customer or with our client exec, I mean, I tell them, let's take a step back, slow down. We really have to see, what are we trying to achieve? Ask the customer, what are you trying to achieve? What are your challenges? What are your goals? Because the answers to those questions drive your outcomes. And so it's not just, oh, well, let's give them this new product that we have, right? It's, what are we trying to achieve? And that's how we help these customers get there. You talk about public cloud, private cloud, and I was working, or we were meeting with a very large customer recently, and he said that all their customers or internal processes, they're pushing to public cloud, but like, we're going to continue to maintain a private cloud footprint because that's where it runs best, and that's where we're familiar with it, and we're going to keep it there. And so he said they really enacted a governance model internally that, as an application comes up for review, they say, does this have to go to public cloud? And they say, if not, then that's when they look at the private cloud solution. I mean, because it can run there, but does it need to run there? And the answer is no. Then you probably are going to be better off putting it into a private cloud scenario.
Yeah. And I think you and I have seen this firsthand, right? Where we've had conversations, we've brought those different experts from those different groups, right? Whether it was our AWS business practice, our VMware expert that came to the conversation, and we've done some of those analysis with customers. So for those that are on today's call, right, we just encourage you to, the more we open up in terms of learning what those whys are, we can have a very opinionated conversation and provide guidance around what's the best case solution. Okay, I think on the next topic we'll move into is kind of a little more explaining about Rackspace's SDDC and giving our perspective on it. And there's a visual up there, but Jake and I like to veer off from the agenda sometimes with that. But I'm going to start by mentioning when we're talking about SDDC, it's really important to note that Rackspace's history in private cloud, where we've been doing it for almost 20 years, right? We still manage one of the largest VMware fleets in the world. And while you're hearing this new name, right, that aligns to the industry language, we've been offering an SDDC solution for almost 5 years now. And our SDDC solution that's been available has primarily catered towards the enterprise and really upper mid-market segment. And I think why we're all so excited, again, going back to customer choice, going back to flexibility, is that now we have multiple flavors of SDDC, really to serve almost all markets and bridge that gap between the cloud and your data center. And Jake, SDDC is not necessarily new. As I highlighted there's the cloud providers, right? The big hyperscalers that have their own VMware-based solutions. I've got some opinions too, right? But in your opinion, what makes Rackspace SDDC a little more unique?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the hyperscalers, right? All the hyperscalers have their flavor of VMware on top of this, VMware on top of that. But what we're finding is you really have to play inside their confines. It's if you we'll pick on AWS a little bit, but if you go into AWC, then you choose the actual physical infrastructure that you're sitting on. You have to basically rent that whole physical host to get there, and they have a few different options. This much compute, this much RAM. But there's multiple components that you have to design for. You have to design for compute, RAM, and storage, right? So sometimes how you get there can be, you take a windy road. So if you have an application that needs a lot of compute but doesn't need that much RAM, or storage, then you have to scale up with 25 of these nodes to get the compute that you need. Well,
Yeah.
then you've also got all these unused resources that you're essentially paying for, and it's the same with RAM and storage. We were working with a customer that they had very low compute needs, so RAM and CPU they just didn't need much. But it was a back-ended application doing some data warehousing and things, and so I mean there are ways to attach storage, but they had to have like 15 of these, the iHost, just to get there. And so, I think that's what's nice about our solutions. Like you mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time. We've had a lot of expertise putting these VMware solutions out for customers, but we look at it and we scale you or build your environment based on those criteria. So you have a lot of flexibility, whether it's on Dell VxRail platform, which is fully integrated stack with VMware, or we look at high power edge servers, and we work with inside what the CPU and RAM offerings that you need. And then we also have shared storage, we have dedicated storage, we have vSAN offerings. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as they say.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to our heritage, right? Our heritage is around customization, flexibility, being customer obsessed, doing what's right for the customer, whether it's from infrastructure to day two support, right? That's how Rackspace has been known, and that's what we continue on with our legacy. And I think it's difficult to find in certain other providers. And you nailed it on the head, Jake. It's like the analogy I use is like with Rackspace SDDC, you're stepping up through stairs, right? And the other ones, it's a floor. You're moving up the entire floor, whether you need it or not. And you better make that, if you've got a round peg, you better make that square hole big enough to fit it, right? As a result of it, there's going to be some waste and excess as a result. The
Comes
last
back
thing,
down to that same question, though. What are we trying to achieve, right?
Yep, at 100%. And I think the other thing that customers are trying to achieve when we compare and contrast the two, it goes back to control, right? And that's where often there's a reluctancy, like people understand and know the benefits of modernizing their own data center and getting out of their facility. And I think control is usually something people want to hang on to, right? We all want control. Jake, you and I are here in Texas. We want control, whether it's over our grid or whether it's over whatever, right? But I think the thing I've seen working in our customer success org is customers love the flexibility of accessing their environment and dictating what happens to their environment, right? Like they're not one of many. When updates are going to be pushed, they need to make it fit within their window. They want dedicated access. They want to dictate when maintenances occur, right? And ensuring that it fits in their window, because 12 a.m. on a weekend may make sense for most customers, but sometimes that's peak hours for others, right? And they want
for an international customer that's running business hours in the UK, that's your main production hours, right? So you're right. It does come down to control, and that's actually one of the main drivers that we've seen kind of in the evolution of our VMware based platform. We've had what we called managed vert or server vert for years, and that was a Rackspace controlled environment where it's a internally shared vSphere and vCenter plane that we manage, and the customers, we build out the VMs and the customers just consume them, and they're fully supported. So you get the full breadth of the Rackspace support on these VMs, but you really kind of at our mercy. We have to provision out those machines for you. We have to put the networking in there. So it takes time, right? So you see that customers are asking for more control, and I feel like that is one of the benefits of SDDC, is that we give a lot more control and freedom to the customers than we ever have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic has changed, right? Customers now, they're used to opening up a control plane and deploying and determining resources, right? They're used to having that view, and it's critical. They need that piece. I think what I would state though, what makes SDDC more unique too, is like you do get the control, but there's still a level of governance that's built into private cloud and the processes that go with it, that the click of a button to expand resources. That has a negative when it comes to a financial aspect too, right? You get runaway costs, you get shadow IT. When it comes to SDDC, particularly the base resources that are within there, it's got a pretty predictable cost structure, right? You can deploy as long as the resources are there and available. And so that has a tangible financial benefit and peace of mind to many CFOs and leaders and others that are managing a budget.
Yeah, going back to kind of what you mentioned when you talked about pushing updates and being at the mercy of the provider, right? So, it just made me think of the VMware and Dell EMC partnership that they have. They're very tightly integrated, and they build solutions that are purpose built for this particular platform. And so when you think about our SDDC offerings, right, we have 3 different offerings. We have an SDDC enterprise solution, which is a VX Rail platform that is VCF based, so VMware Cloud Foundation, standardized on VX Rail hardware. Though that solution, VMware built that solution so that they could fully continuously integrate that stack without causing disruption to the to the rest of the environment. So if I'm pushing updates into VMware component or the NSXT environment, I can do that real time without disruption. Whereas if I'm on someone else's platform, like you said, you're kind of at their mercy. Now it gives you a lot of control, but if you don't want that kind of control, you can kind of peel back that onion a little bit and go with either the Power Edge solution, which is SCDC business, can be vSAN, dedicated SAN. You still get that single tenant environment, and customers still get that API level control, or they can access via the GUI. But you don't have to go within such a more powerful solution. And then you have customers that just want something that's extremely versatile and flexible, and that's what our SCDC Flex offering is.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about the way our product team has designed this is there can be a combination of any of those, right? Where we can layer the 2 on with it. And I think that's what makes it unique and dynamic. It looks like Sky's getting tired of us talking, and he's trying to move us on to the next one, which is the SDDC benefits. We'll go through, we kind of shared some of these already through our conversation, but we'll tackle some of these here as well. I think I'll start at the top, Jake, if you'd like, but from the consumption-based pricing, going back to my statement, right? When private cloud has the benefits of public cloud, it creates ultimate flexibility, and customers win based on that, right? Because they have choice. With consumption-based pricing, it goes as granular as 1 VM, right? If customers are needing 1 to 15 VMs, they deploy those virtual machines. They pay for only what they use on an hourly basis. So whether it's a dev workload or an expansion, right, of your baseline resources, you need some seasonality capacity. You need some workloads that are only up for portions of the business days that you want to spin down and then use automation to bring them back up. We can do that with that consumption-based pricing. And then, of course, there still is a predictable pricing model for those baseline resources that customers prefer or want that consistent budgetary expense. So it's really the best of both worlds, giving customers that financial agility that they're seeking.
Yeah, and I think it goes deeper even than just say 1 VM, 5 VMs, 10 VMs. That we in the past, what Rackspace has offered is a kind of an all or none solution, the consumption model, right? The VMware licensing stack that customers had to subscribe to and purchase was the one that we deployed, and the costs obviously reflected that. Now customers can really kind of choose what hardware they want to run on, give some flexibility. Do they want VX Rail? Do they want PowerEdge servers? Do they want a multi-tenant solution? And they can get really granular to, what do they want to add on there? Do we need things like vRealize operations? Do we need log insights? Do we need network insights? Do we need NSXT? Or are we going to use traditional, bare metal load balancing and things like that? I mean, and all those can be added upfront or down the road. And so, customers can either self-service this environment, or if they want the full end-to-end solution, they can do that and then get things like, we can manage and monitor the operating system, we can patch the machines, we can manage antivirus, or if they don't want any of these, they have that ability now to just provision out these machines and say, hey, this is a dev workload, I don't care about it, don't back it up, don't monitor it, don't do anything, and we don't charge any extra for those VMs. And they can spin them up, spin them down, as they see fit, right?
Yeah, flexibility, not just infrastructure, right, but support needs, and those day two operations. I think that's critically important, and the ability to mix and match, right? That gives you ultimate flexibility and choice. We talked about, again, the customization within the hardware, which makes it flexible. I would also say it helps make an organization more agile, right? If you don't want to deal with procurement cycles on your side, supply chain challenges, you tap into Rackspace's buying power, you tap into Rackspace's inventory, you tap into all of those things at scale, to have flexible infrastructure that can be added, right, and doesn't need a 12-month planning cycle to get within there.
Yep,
Jake, there's some
exactly.
cool stuff, and the cool stuff though, in terms of, again, the control, the access, what that means towards self-service, rapid deployment, automation. Do you want to, jump in and share some of those examples?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of what we're seeing is customers want that level of control, that level of access they haven't had before. They want the visibility into their environment. So, they want to see what they're running, how they're running, and be able to spin things up, spin things down. And then there's also a lot of customers that, the DevOps style customers, the mode two operations, they're using things like automation scripts and deploying, automation deployment tools. And those are things that we give control, we give the ability to do. So you can do the traditional login via the web sphere or the GUI and spin up, spin down VMs. But what we're seeing is more and more customers are taking advantage of things like Terraform, PowerShell, Chef, Ansible, Puppet. They're using these deployment tools to kind of build out their environments. And interestingly enough, I mean, what we're doing, we're kind of taking some lessons learned from our public cloud environment and putting it into the private cloud environment. Is we built what we call our build automation tool. Fancy name, right? But what we do is we ask a lot of questions. We take all the inputs from you or the customer and their environment, and then the output is a Terraform template, and then that's used to deploy the environment. And then the nice thing is customers have access to those Terraform templates and they can modify them down the road. We try to give customers as much flexibility and control as we can. Now, there are things that we can't give control to, right? Just because it has to work and we have an SLA we have to provide, but we give as much access as we can.
Yeah, 100%. Jake, should we talk a little bit about the future of SDDC? What's some of the exciting stuff that's on the roadmap? I think, as we stated here, SDDC is the flagship VMware private cloud solution for Rackspace moving forward. It's multiple flavors, some of them that we highlighted. The roadmap's extremely exciting. A couple of the things that are coming out very soon. There's a managed disaster recovery solution based on SDDC that'll be backed by multiple leading replication technologies. And
the nice thing about some of the DR stuff that we're doing, we're looking at developing two different offerings, right? So customers that want just simple DR that we implement and it backs it up. We also are building a solution of fully automated managed DR that costs a little bit more, but you subscribe to that and then you get a much more advanced run book for your DR replication. So there's multiple things that are coming out there too.
Yeah, DR that you actually use and can test. It's exciting.
That you can test.
Yeah. The next is we're working on more customized SDDC edge-based solutions. So getting further closer to our customers at the edge, both on their site and at closely located co-location facilities that service them at the edge. Specialized package SDDC for SAP workloads and VDI workloads. And then, Jake, I know you're a big fan of this one, right? With SDDC Tanzu, that Kubernetes-based offering based on VMware Tanzu, the best of SDDC, the best of Rackspace's experts in VMware and containerization with Kubernetes. That's one that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk around Tanzu and containerization. But going back to what you mentioned, the edge solutions, we've actually been doing these for a number of years, and it's kind of interesting how we deploy these SDDC Edge, or what we used to call RPCV Anywhere. So this is a little easier to say, but so you've got customers that have an environment inside their data center, whether it be a traditional colo, they've got it in their building. They want to refresh this environment, or they want to have us manage the VMware component of it. they don't want to have to manage that relationship, they can do that. And there's ways that they can consume it, whether it be they work with us. We have solution architects that are VMware based. That's all they do all day long is talk vSphere. And they can build out and say, this is exactly what that solution would look like. And here's what it's going to look like inside your environment. Here's the what they call the cabinet diagram, the cabinet layout. And then we can give you that and roll that rack into your colo. We can roll it into, a closet inside your data center, however you want to do that. And we help you connect and manage that. It can still be Rackspace provided licensing. We do all the hard, heavy lifting, and you just replace and refresh. Now, there are customers that say, well, I have a lot of hardware already on site. I'm going to build it. Can you manage it, maintain it? And we can do that too. We just have to kind of look at what hardware you're running. Is it going to fit? Is it supported hardware by VMware? And if that's the case, we can help build that solution as well. So, like the edge, we've been doing that for a while.
Yeah. Modernization outcomes based on your why, right? Regardless of where or how it's done.
That's right. What are we trying to achieve? Remember?
Yep. Sky, I think Jake and I are about out of coffee. We're probably ready to move into to Q&A, huh?
Yes, definitely. So thank you all for your questions. However, yeah, like Peter said, we have reached the ending of our session. A Rackspace technology representative we'll send you guys the information if you guys have questions that we don't get. So let me start reading them off for you guys. So the first one says, my legacy applications work great. How can I further reduce costs?
Okay,
you want to take that one, Peter?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think one, fantastic that the application's running great. Going back to the statement I made earlier, every single client we talk to is trying to do more with less, right? But they need to do that without disrupting the business, without causing challenges, right? Because that's the ultimate goal of IT, is to service and support the business. And so I think what's important to look at is the total cost of ownership there. And so, whether it's facilities, the maintenance of the facility, having spare parts and backup equipment that's there for that, and then of course the resources that go into it. And so I would just challenge them to think about factoring all of those things in, right? Knowing that it's running well, would new gear allow it to run even more performant and efficient? Would there be ways to reduce costs based on all of those additional ancillary costs? I think those would be things that I would explore in a conversation with them, again, to look at total cost of ownership.
Total cost of ownership is extremely important, right? To go from a non-technical kind of example, it's like my kids, they wanted a puppy, right? And they're like, Dad,
oh God,
it costs X. And they're like, that's all. And so they all saved up the money, and they said, here, we have the money for the dog. And I said, okay, but hold on, you have to understand there's a lot of other factors that go into owning a dog. It's like, so one is buying the dog, but I was like, two, you have to take it to the vet. You have to buy food. You have to, there's all the things that you have to do for training, like cleaning. I mean, I don't know how many times we ended up getting the dog, but I can't tell you how many times
of course you did.
Clean the floor. Got to buy toys. I got to buy cages. I got to figure out what to do with it over the weekend when we're out playing baseball. I mean, there's so many things that go into it that's that total cost of ownership that people don't really understand, right? Or they do understand it. They just don't think about it.
Yeah, mine's a doggy daycare today, just for the audience purposes only, so you guys don't have to hear the barking when the Amazon intruder comes over.
He's on the porch.
You were losing me a little bit, but as soon as you brought that dog analogy, I completely understand. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I think the next question we have is, I have a heavy CAD solution for public cloud. What options do you recommend that allow me to scale but are affordable?
So, I get this question, or this type of question, a lot, right? It's, customers have these just big, beefy applications and they want to just take this and go to public cloud, right? But you have to think about it, private cloud is probably a way, it is a way for you to really have that resource and that power to run 24/7 at a fixed cost. If you take a big beefy application like a CAD program and you put it into something like a public cloud, what you have to, how much you have to spend to have that thing run successfully, it really scales quickly. And so even when it's not running, you still have to be on those resources. Where if you're in a public private cloud environment, you can design that infrastructure mainly designed for that workload. You can keep the costs fixed so that you're not having to look at that hyperscaler bill every month and be like, why are we spending this? Why, it's you kind of, they always say you own the base rent the spike, but that's what we see when you have these really powerful applications, is that yes, while they can go to public cloud, it is sometimes better fit for something like private cloud. But and so that's kind of what we are seeing in that.
Yeah, I think people also forget, Jake, like the benefits of intimacy of knowing your application, right? Because there's many clients that know their application so well, and they know they can oversubscribe, right, on those resources in certain areas. They know when they can oversubscribe and when they need to peel back as a result of it. And that's one of the substantial benefits of SDC and having your own resources, because there is no oversubscription, right? If you need to leverage more resources, you better tap into them with those different other options, right?
Yeah, we see that a lot when we design these VMware solutions. Is people are asking, what's your oversubscription ratio, and the answer is it depends. You probably get that answer a lot, but we talk about what kind of workload is it? Is it cyclical? Is it something that runs only 3 hours a day? Is it something that's seasonal? Does it spike up, spike down? So, while you can oversubscribe your environment at certain points, like you said, if you know how your environment runs, that allows you to, really take advantage of that private cloud infrastructure. And so, like, you may have a QA dev test workload that, hey, we spin it up for a week. That's it. And then so, I might be oversubscribed over here, but it doesn't matter because it's just 1 week out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you both. Looks like we do have a trend with all of these questions. They're really centered around cost. So we'll do this last question and then we'll wrap it up. If we don't get to any questions, we'll reach out and answer those questions directly. I have a small on-premise data center. With this model you presented, is there a way to save costs?
Well, I think that goes to the amount of flavors, right? Now there's additional flavors to appeal to clients with smaller workloads, maybe in a smaller segment of the market. And we talked about TCO kind of in the first one. The other thing I would say is to remember, right, that I think whoever's asking the question, right, is framing it in the financial cost, but it's also important to think through, what is your opportunity cost, right? Because a concern that I would have is small on-premise data center, right? If within small facilities, and I've walked through some buildings and seen the data center closet of different organizations, it's usually using some valuable real estate, right, within it. It doesn't always have the greatest levels of redundancy within that environment. And usually if you're thinking of modernization, the physical constraints you're going to have in that small facility are going to present different challenges, right? And draw
I've seen some
projects out
interesting
even
closets.
further. Yeah. And so I would just look again, what are those opportunity costs that come with that piece as well? And even for those workloads that aren't production or mission critical, right? Most clients don't really think about, it's a dev environment. If it's down, it's not a big deal. But then they're not thinking about what happens if hours of code is lost, right? Because that environment went down. What happens if your developers are idle for a full day because you're trying to bring this environment back up, right? There is a tangible cost related to that oftentimes isn't considered. And so I think economically that we may be able to, depending on how small it is, right, still be able to find some savings. But I think the greater opportunity is how we save on opportunity cost, stability and performance there.
Yeah, you got to think about your barriers of entry too, right? So, to have a small environment run, there's a lot of things that have to be above it, right? You have to have the building, you have to have the power, you have to have the network, you have to have the cooling, you have to have the hardware, you have to have the support, all these different things that go into it, where, we modernize and normalize those costs so that customers can, like you mentioned, consume, I need 10 VMs. We
Yeah.
put that into our flex environment, right? Or if I need 100 VMs, we have a different solution. But that's you don't have to go out and procure all this gear, get the space, get the people just to run this small environment. So that's one way that customers possibly could save cost. But I agree with you. You have to look at the total opportunity cost.
Yeah.
All right, thank you both. And then for those of you who still want to continue this conversation about SCDC, a QR code is appearing on the screen now. Please tell us about your projects and we can chat about it and see how we can help. And the coffee is on us. This is Coffee Talks after all. To our guests, thank you so much for your time to listen to this conversation. Soon we will share the information about our next episode. Remember, the replay of this conversation will be available on our YouTube, Rackspace Technology. Thank you, Jake and Peter, and thank you for all of our participants in the Zoom meet today. See you all in the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.